What's going on? Um, Kind of want to talk about this whole way of the warrior, kind of philosophy thing going on here. I kind of studied a bunch of these ancient texts, like the Art of War. I mean, the Bible itself, right? If you just read Chronicles or Numbers, there's all these accounts of these awesome battles, and also in the Indian stuff. When I read the history of the tribes here in Michigan, or in Minnesota, uh, it reads a lot like the Chronicles do in the Bible, and also when it comes to this Asian Eastern chronicles of their stuff, it's just like kind of like chronicles from the Bible. I mean, there's tales of people's deeds and exploits of evil and righteousness in a way. Like there's glimpses at righteousness, and they're kind of documented in there. It's kind of nice to share in that by just reading this stuff. I mean, back in the day, I guess this is what the stories you'd have around the campfire, or at like holiday gatherings. You know what I mean? But it's the Musashi's on this kind of like the twofold craft of the warrior. It's both pen and the sword. Like he actually ended his life kind of just being kind of almost like a county parks, like a beautifier, and like to do building projects. And I kind of live that life. Now I clean up job sites, cut down bushes, put in trees. Sometimes, I mean, I've done that. Built stuff, tore stuff down, painted stuff, and with the tools, you get a lot of wax on, wax off, like real time experience, and that's kind of what Musashi kind of based his kind of philosophy on. Is that basically, man, all the stuff that you need is there, and like life itself is the teacher, and you don't need to follow other schools and take all these revered kind of like niches where, like, people have these specific kind of skills, and they're kind of flashy and kind of like esoteric, and but ultimately they're not really that effective. They're just kind of like I don't know, just this guy was a total Terminator, and he could just see, part of being the ninja skill set is really, it's not what you would think. It totally is using your mind, our imaginations, and our ability that we exaggerate, and the way we hear things and repeat them. Normally the story gets bigger down the line, and it's like it's empathy is a big skill of a ninja, is that I can feel what you're feeling and get inside of your shoe, put myself in your shoes, in other words, or use my imagination in the constructive fashion to kind of survey the land and look for any, like a tracker, when you see different tracks, you look which direction they're going, like stuff like that. There's details and stuff to be gleaned, backdrop information, or stuff like that, man. There's just, if you're aware and you're perceptive, and we all have these capabilities, and the other one is psychology, like knowing mob mentality, crowd mentality, or what is it, crowd mob, I don't know what it's called, but I know what it is. It's basically when it's like same thing that causes a stampede in a herd of buffalo. It's just when people get together in large groups, they're it's like you're kind of like your will kind of starts to dissipate, because you're in the midst of so many different people that you kind of get in a hive mindish kind of, and you're prone to just instantly like absorb someone else's emotions, and if they riot, you might break out into spontaneous riot or potentially panic. And a person who's desperately panicking and flailing about is dangerous. They're just as bad as a rioter who wants to steal your purse, because you might just be so flighty that on your escape, you knock an old woman down, and then she's trampled by hooligans because you lost your self-control. But it's understandable in those circumstances, and there you go. See, it's like, all right, these people are gonna have their politics and their but necessarily I got to live in that, but I don't have to be part of that. But I can observe that and know about that, and just kind of keep it under my hat, and so to speak. And this is kind of the true realm of where the magic or whatever, where it happens, man. It's just the ability to think things out, and also you kind of got to have that. You got to know what your options are, and you know what I'm saying. And the only way you can do that is kind of by studying and experience, and also listening to what's going on around, but not being stuck in that. See, that's what Musashi was against. He was like, he didn't like people who were overly dependent on any kind of one modality to accomplish their renown or whatever. That's because that's kind of what was going on. It's kind of like the same thing that goes on the internet now. Like they could go and write posters and like put it up in town square, and people would see it. It was like the message board on the internet now, and then they would go fight out in public, like, oh, you dishonor me. And they would this guy would intentionally like heckle people and get them to go fight. And he not murder, because murder's just like, I want you to die, and I just sneak attack, or I want everyone to see this because I want fear and power. Like this has been done in the gangland here, but they make you an example and murk somebody right out in public, and everyone sees it, but yet no one will snitch. So you have the fear and the juice and the power now, and it's like there was a lot of that going on back in the day. So that's why it's kind of graphic content, all this stuff, dude, all that, the stuff from Asia, the stuff from the Native Americans, the stuff in the freaking Bible is like super masculine, like and it's not considered toxic. You know what I'm saying? It's just reality. You know what I'm saying? And there's got to see things for the way they are, and avoid like restrain the fear and the panic and the exaggeration and all these things that will you know what I'm saying, cloud your what's going on, and by you can't be overly fixed on the things but then again you kind of got to retain these things and have them floating around in there and use them as kind of like a guide or indicator sites, and you like, and it keeps you pointing in whatever direction, the right direction. And it's like, and all this stuff's constantly in flux, just like if you're in a freaking archer and you're trying to pick off a moving target, and you're way up on a cliff like an Indian, like an Apache, and there's a guy and he's riding way down over here, and I'm gonna shoot way up and snipe this guy as he's going off into the sunset. Like for instance, you can kind of it gives you your bearings through things, and you gotta train it, and you gotta study, and you gotta have dedication, and you gotta be willing almost to go just a little farther than everybody else. And it's kind of like we all have these wings, but the only thing stopping us from getting higher is us. You know what I'm saying? So it's like whoever's up there, and you just get right out of somebody's reach there, it's kind of a niche you can exploit, and this guy kind of did it. And I thought it was clever, you know what I'm saying? This whole the way he wrote this book, it's probably someone's probably kind of even it's he expresses in it that this is only kind of like this is just kind of it's almost like Bruce Lee said, this is kind of his Jeet Kune Do was a canoe only be used to get across the river, but it must be abandoned on the other side of the river. But it's basically a thing to help get you where you want to go, and it's pretty. It's kind of it's very specific, but at that time it can be very, very general, and you'll see these kind of little signposts, man, and it's like it's kind of it's strange, man. But just the more stuff you do, and once you're aware that it's like if your attention's too much on something, you miss the peripheral. You know what I'm saying? But if you're just all up, like, if you're not paying attention, you don't see what's in your sights or in the peripheral. But it's like if you kind of focus on the peripheral, you can see everything. And it's kind of like, you got to kind of you practice to the point where it's just a part of regular day life. That is Mr. Miyagi, wax on, wax off. You know what I'm saying? And there's this one dude, and he keeps like knocking on like the use of the shuriken with the ninja. And Musashi wasn't like part of a ninja clan, but he was kind of a ronin, which is kind of and he had kind of some of these attributes that were he was off beat. He wasn't like necessarily seemed like a big time conformist. He was more of like a non-conformist type. He kind of challenged the norms. And there's this account of him, whether or not it's a ninja technique. It is. This is documented that man, actually, this I just almost had another flashback of something else that I read about a guy who killed somebody with a throwing knife. But anyway, there's an account of Musashi where he's fighting this guy, and there's this thing called, like, I think it's called a kurigama, but I could be wrong because look, my Japanese sucks. But it's a chain and sickle weapon, and he said this thing was like really a weapon of terror because he didn't know when it was coming or where it was coming from exactly, and it had a psychological effect. And basically what happened is the dude like attacked, and then Musashi pulled out a freaking little miniature knife and then threw it and then stabbed the guy in the throat, and he died. So it's kind of like, look, it's kind of like a cheap shot, but it but but it's kind of like you can kind of see that one as ironic, because this guy's got this weapon that he just wants to keep all this distance, and then he puts you under all this pressure, right? So as soon as you get a chance to get him, you're gonna get him, and even better if you get him at his own game, which is kind of from a distance. Like I kind of like that there, but no, it's like the Indians were known for their hand-to-hand combat and their throwing of the tomahawks, and I've done that too. Freaking and the Vikings also were known for these throwing tactics. So I mean, it's Hollywood's tried to capitalize on the concept of the shuriken, and I haven't actually really ever read any ninja scrolls, like actual ninja scrolls. I just read books about them, so it's like I'm only going off what I had the luxury to look at. But it's just like all these like Indian, they were guerrilla warfare like masters. And my grandpa was in Vietnam, and he told me these stories because he had CPTSD, and he would like repeat these stories about all this horrible carnage and stuff. So it's like, in a way, now I can draw from all these like different scenarios and these little glimpses into history and times bygone, and there's like all kinds of like intelligence, literal intelligence to be gleaned. And no one really, like, it's so rare to have a conversation with someone who's even versed in even one of these subjects, let alone well-rounded in a few. You know what I mean? So, and Musashi said you don't need to practice with anyone else. You could do this all on your own with no school if you just kind of stick to the way. And, and it's the same thing like with your belief in your religion. It's like you don't need people to get you there. It's like you have everything that you need if you're just willing to use what's there and that's available, and it's been there and available, and it's just you overlook it or you just don't want it, but it's all there. And these are just regular people sometimes, man, who kind of see it.